we're translating into. Now let me just give you an example, how different forms can give us the same value. I can take out of my pocket a $5 bill and put that here. And that, in a sense, is the same value as 5 $1 bills. It's the same value as 20 quarters. They have different form, but they have the same value. They have the same meaning when you go into a store. And that's exactly what dynamic equivalency said. We need to find the natural form that that other language uses. So if the word was water in English, they looked for yanyi in Yala. They looked for mung in Efik. They looked for what word speaks about that. In addition, they thought the word order may have to be shifted also in order for things to be clearly understood in another language. And so you might say, as it does say in, I think it's in Deuteronomy and also in Psalms at some place, the mighty arm and the outstretched hand. Now dynamic equivalency would look at that and they'd say, mighty arm and outstretched hand, what does that mean in the original language? And they would see a parallelism between the mighty hand and the outstretched arm, as though the outstretched arm was powerful. Then they looked at English and they say, but outstretched arm in English may mean, hey, I am welcoming you. It could even mean, I surrender. And so there's ambiguity. Dynamic equivalency would say something's got to be done about that. So they came up with the mighty and powerful. So that was, in fact, dynamic equivalence. I want to go on for a minute to say what the closest natural dynamic equivalence is. You notice in that statement, hand is kind of a picture. Powerful hand, you think of something like this. And if you then want outstretched hand to be a parallel to that, you're going to say powerful, outstretched arm. Now there's a picture that comes into your mind with a hand. And if you say mighty and powerful, that's abstract. That's fine. But it's more powerful if you can say a powerful hand and a mighty arm. That's the closest natural equivalency, you see. You could have chosen either one of the two. But we're saying, choose the one that's closest to the source language. If the source language had a picture, if it had an idiom, find a picture, find an idiom. Cross the translation river twice. Say powerful, but have hand there too. Say mighty, but have arm there as well. So equivalence got to do with faithfulness. It's got to do with accuracy. It's got to do with the veracity of the meaning. It's got to do with the same meaning needing to come across. But natural, see, that's a very important word as well, because what may be natural in one language is not always natural in another language. And so we need to find the way that people would talk to each other in their own language. We need to translate into that kind of things. In other words, if we say, you know, he's kind of like a snake in the grass, that's an idiom. Now, can we translate that across to another language where a snake is considered to be a very important animal in that culture? No, we're going to have to find some other way of talking about it. Maybe we're going to use a different kind of idiom, that he is like a skunk, which we also use in English, and that has some kind of idiomatic meaning. Sometimes there's no idiom, and when there's no idiom, you just got to figure out what is the basic denotative meaning and to say it as clearly as you can. And so sometimes you might have to say mighty and strong rather than mighty arm and strong hand.
Why would you go back to the original languages?
We use two words to talk about that in Bible translation, and one is called base and the other is called model. And you know, if you're going to start with anything, you want to start with a base. You want to start with the foundation, and not with some kind of a model that was developed out of that base or out of that foundation. So therefore we know that Bible translation, even Bible translation in an area of the world where someone doesn't know Greek or Hebrew. You know, every language, in a sense, is kind of a mirror of a different kind of way of life, of how someone in the past who has looked at this basic meaning in the original source language and has said this is the kind of adjustments that have to be made to get that meaning very, very carefully and very accurately across that translation river. And sometimes when you look at another language, you say, that exactly fits this one. But maybe you have to look at 4 or 5 models before you find the one. And sometimes none of them work. And you just have to do your best to get across that river.
When you think of the translation, the result now, you have God's Word that has been published. Go back to the beginning. What was your process? How did you balance the scientific study of language with the theological goal of sharing God's Word and the love of God? You had a process there.
God, in his own way, brought some men together at Concordia Theological Seminary, got me into a room, and asked me the question about Bible translation. And I got up to the board and started drawing lines and showing that none of the English ones really were as accurate as they should be according to the original. And none of the English ones we had now were really natural, totally natural, the way we spoke English today. And finally they said to me, now, if we're going to do that kind of a translation, what is it going to take to do it? And I knew now I could put this to rest from my perspective. As I said to them, well, it's going to take 5 people, with PhDs, people that really know the Greek, people that really know the Hebrew, people that know Aramaic, people that are theologians. We're going to have at least a team of 5 good translators. We're going to have some people that are specialists in English, readability consultants and reviewers who can really do this review for naturalness. Then finally one of them, who was a Fortune 500 owner, said, well, what's that going to cost? And that's what I was waiting for, really, because I figured this could put this to sleep real quick. And I said to him, I would suggest it's going to cost $5 million at the minimum. And that turned those people on. It means now that we're going to make available to these translators computers. It was just at that time when the computer was really coming in. And we need to have these people connected with the Louvre, that is in Paris. We're going to have them connected with the British Museum. We're going to have them connected with the Vatican in Rome, the Sistine Chapel, and all those books that there are down there. We need them connected with the best places in the world to be able to get all the best information, not only about those ancient texts. We've talked about the source, but we need to understand what was the culture around that source, so that when we're making exegetical decisions, we make them in terms of the context in which those original documents were written. So they said, well, yes, that's good. And then I said, in addition to the translators, you've got to realize when one of those translators has translated the text, and now we're going to get to the process, one of the translators would be assigned to, say, the book of Genesis. That translator would work at all the kind of information he needed from the source, language, and culture in order to do the best possible translation of that book into the English language, which was Genesis. Then we took that first draft, turned that over to an English reviewer. And an English reviewer, they would be ruthless, because they could take their red pen and they'd say, that's not how anybody says it today. That's not how they do it. 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 And that was their main job initially, is to point out where the problems were. Then we teamed that translator up with that particular reviewer that had done this thing, and we said, all right, now you people work out a second draft together. And you translator, you have to take very seriously everything that this English reviewer has said to you. At the same time, you English reviewer, you can't insist on your way at the expense of the source meaning. So they did this balancing act then. Closest natural equivalent. First equivalent, and is natural, and then the closest possible one that we can get. Then it was given to the peers. Now what do I mean by peers? The peers were the 5 translators and the 3 English reviewers. Those were part of the full-time team. And so all of them would get that Genesis then, both the translators and the English reviewers. And they would go through it. And they would say, this is something we got to look at here. This is something. The meaning might have been compromised a little bit here. Or this is still not natural English here. And then it was adjusted at that point.